Hello, everyone. Welcome to another edition of the Kaiju Kingdom podcast. We are your hosts,
Jessica.
And I am Chris Eaton. Oh, and Jessica, we are starting off 2026 with a bang. We have a guest.
Yes, very excited.
Been a hot minute, but this man's this man's latest work. I think that's a good way to put it, right? It's your work.
Sure.
Yes.
Is actually garnering quite the attention.
Oh.
Sir, please introduce yourself to those listening at home.
Well, thanks for having me, Chris and Jessica. It's so nice to be here with you. I'm Jeffrey Engels, and I'm a professor of Japanese literature at Western Michigan University. I really enjoy these movies, and so in recent years, I've started working on the literary aspect of the kaiju verse. I really wanted to show the world that there are all these kind of interesting literary versions of these same texts that we know and love that have been out there in Japan and circulating for some time. And so I've translated two kaiju-related books. One is over here, Godzilla and Godzilla Raids Again. These were the novelizations of those two films made in 1955, which when I realized they were out there, I couldn't believe that they hadn't been translated yet. Thank you there for showing it on the screen.
Yeah, there it is.
Woohoo! It's this beautiful cover. And more recently, in fact, just this month, we have the official publication date of the Luminous Fairies and Mothra, the early 1961 novella that was the basis of the movie that was released in mid-1961. So in this case, we have the novella coming before the film, and so this was the first form in which Mothra was ever exposed to the world. So I was really excited, especially to be able to bring this text into English.
And this is, as you pointed out, this is an interesting, a very interesting nook. I would even say it's a corner. It's a nook of this fandom.
Yeah.
It was last year that you guys released Godzilla Raids Again, or was it the year before?
It was late 2023, I think, was the publication.
Okay, so we're about 2 years at this point. We're beginning of January, so the timing's a little, as Doctor Who's, it's a little timey-wimey right now. But yes, the second that was announced, I'm like, this is some wild, deep cut stuff right here. I can't believe this is getting released. And then smash cut over the summer, you guys announced you're doing the Mothra novella, which I'm like, that is even, you're going deeper into the rabbit hole. Like Alice did not go this deep. I mean, the Jabberwocky's like, dude, I don't know. That's way down there. So first off, bless your guys' hearts for doing this, because this is such a beautiful niche thing that outside of the Japanese speaking world, very few Americans even know about. And the fact now that you can walk into a Barnes and Noble and pick up these stories that are, this one's 65 years old at this point, and the other one is now 71, 72, and fresh, brand new. We all have our copies here. I sat down and read it over the weekend, and it's insane to see that because again, not many people on the Western Hemisphere can speak the language, and very few can actually translate what these stories actually are. You can maybe go to a Wikipedia and get a general idea, but it leaves out a lot of the nuances. Yeah. And here you are translating them for us who can't speak a lick of Japanese but love this stuff to death.
Well, I have to say thank you out there, like to the fandom, because it was really thanks to fandom that I was able to do this. So, I did the Godzilla Raids Again, just as my own sort of personal pet project, being a Godzilla fan since I was a kid. I decided I kind of did that during the pandemic, as a way to keep myself, occupied and, from going insane, during the weird loneliness of those years. And there was such a good response, and it was a bunch of fans that ended up writing to University of Minnesota Press, the press that released these, and said, "Hey guys, we love the Godzilla book. We hope that you'll do the Luminous Fairies and Mothra next." So my editor at UMP, University of Minnesota Press, turned around and asked me, "Hey Jeffrey, what do you know about this book? Luminous Fairies and Mothra. Would you be interested in doing it?" And honestly, at that point, I had not even read it yet. I knew it existed, but I immediately, as soon as I got his email, turned around, looked online, and saw who the authors were, and I decided immediately, without even having read it yet, that I wanted to do it because it's really interesting. It's written by 3 authors. I'm sure we might talk about this in a bit, but these are really famous guys. They're all people who are really well known in the world of modern Japanese literature, and they're not people that are really people that we would tend to associate very quickly with like science fiction or fantasy. They're all kind of what I think people would refer to in Japanese as junbungaku, or pure literature. In other words, like sort of highbrow, kind of more intellectual literature. And so I was really hugely surprised to find out that these 3 authors had worked on this. One of the guys already was an author who I knew and loved. And so when I saw that his name was on it, I'm just like, dude, I'm doing it. I wrote back to the press immediately, not even having read it, and said, yes, I want to do it. So anyway, thank you to whoever you are. If you're listening and you wrote to University of Minnesota Press to tell them to do this book, thank you, because this is one of the the funnest projects I think I've ever done in my entire career. Even more fun than Godzilla, I have to say, because I got the chance to look into so many interesting and quirky things. There's a lot less written about Mothra than about Godzilla, and so there was a lot of fun stuff to look into.
It is a interesting story where because it does kind of follow a little bit of the Godzilla and the Raids Again stories, where they're essentially just early written promotional material for what would eventually become the movies. And unlike the other 2, this one is I'm hesitant to say it's a bit of a Frankenstein novella, but it kind of is, considering it's written in 3 different parts by 3 different authors. Not unlike the new Star Wars trilogy that came out a couple years ago, where it's like we're telling one story, but we're letting technically 2 people, but it's the same kind of idea there. That connection fell apart at the last second once I realized what I was saying. But yes, it's the fact that they're telling this continuous story, and this was published in a weekly magazine in Japan, right?
That's right. And when it appeared in the weekly magazine in January 1961, I should mention it was a very kind of popular magazine. It was what in Japanese is called a sogozashi, a general magazine, which includes some literature, some society, some fashion, all those kind of a variety of different subjects. And so this was like one of the literary installments in that magazine. When it appeared in that magazine, it appeared with like a very specific byline that said, this is, I can't remember the exact wording, but something like, look forward to more. There's going to be more from Mothra forthcoming. There was a note that it was going to be produced as a movie for Toho. So in a way, this did function a little bit as an advertising mechanism for the movie that was forthcoming. It did that. So it fulfilled a couple of functions, but basically what this is, it's, as you said, it's, I think, a Frankenstein novella is a good way to refer to it, because it's a bunch of sort of pieces that are put together by these 3 different authors to make a bigger story. And the story that they produced, these 3 authors produced, they gave it to Toho Studios and said, okay, now you do what you are going to do with it. The story that I've translated here was basically a plan for the movie. So as well, as I mentioned before, as kind of performed an advertising function when it was released in the magazine. So it had this multiple functions at once. And so that kind of leads it to be a sort of quirky story.
It very much does. I mean, it is in many ways like old pulp, like how old pulp stories were published, like Howard and Lovecraft, like, because those that's the thing I think of, maybe some modern fans don't realize, like, this is how everyone got their stuff. It's akin to what manga does today, where you buy the one big book and you get the chapter. That's back in before, when you paid a nickel to go to the movies because that's all you had. This is the other way people got their stories. And doing it like this is such a wild, concept, because, Robert E. Howard did not like go, hey, I'm writing half a Conan story, and then I'm going to let, say my buddy H.P. Lovecraft write the back end. And we're going to just tangentially discuss like where the story's going, but you do what you're going to do. I mean, and also in many ways, they basically, like, each author wrote an act of the film, in the 3-act structure, as you would. With the beginning, it was Nakamura that basically did the setup, and the other two gave us the middle and then the third act. And reading this, it does feel like that at times. Like, the heavy lifting is done in the beginning, and then you get to here's the problem, here's our antagonist or protagonist, and then the action sequence in the third act. So let's talk about that method of translating 3 different authors for one solid work, because it's a little more of a hassle than it sounds.
It was a big hassle, let me tell you. The main reason I say that is because we had to get 3 sets of permissions for this one text, rather than simply one set of permissions like you would in a single author text. And unfortunately, one of the reasons that this came 2 years on the heels of Godzilla and Godzilla Raids Again was because one of the estates for one of the authors didn't respond for a very, very long time. So we had to keep on prodding, and I had my agents in Japan working on this for a while. But fortunately it all worked out, and so we were able to clear that hurdle. But in terms of style, as you pointed out, the style and content of all 3 of the authors is quite different. They definitely feel in Japanese like they were written by 3 people, which they absolutely were. The 3 sections are each labeled, with the name of the author who wrote it, and so they're very distinct. As you pointed out, the first chapter, or first section, I guess, sets up the characters very well. It kind of sets up the general outlines of the story. Then it basically turns over that story to the author, and like, okay, the next author, what are you going to do next? And the final section is the one that contains most of the action. By that point, there's not a lot of pages left in the story, so the portions that are the action scenes are pretty sketchy, I'd say, and part of that has to do with the fact that there wasn't a lot of word count left, but there was also the guys who wrote this, they knew that Toho Studios was going to turn this text over to our beloved special effects director Eiji Tsuburaya, and so they knew that he was going to do whatever he was going to do with the visuals. And so rather than kind of write it out in tons of detail, they just sort of decided to leave a lot of the stuff up to him. So the action scenes are a little bit sketchier than I would have expected, when I first sat down to read this novel. But it also leaves that space for Tsuburaya to work all of his cinematic magic for us.
Yeah. Was that author known for writing action?
No.
Okay.
He wasn't, and so I think maybe that's one of the reasons that it sort of feels a little bit thin in places. He was very much an intellectual writer that got into a lot of political problems. He was really interested in thinking about Japan's future as a nation. He's very interested in international relations. In fact, that author, he had lived in China during the time of World War II, and he stayed in China after the war ended and continued to live there for many years. So he was a much more kind of like internationally minded person than I think many ordinary Japanese citizens were at that time. So he had that history and that background, and carried that over into his work. in a way, maybe one of the things that I kind of like to talk about today is that the whole concept of this novel is that Japan needs to be part of the greater world, not just sucked into one side of the Cold War struggle, but Japan needed to form relations with people in smaller nations, decolonizing nations around the world, and that was something that this author, the third author, believed in really strongly. He wrote that a great deal in his other work. Um, so anyway, he brings that idea to apply to Mothra, and I think that that's one of the reasons that I found this text so interesting, is that there was all this kind of interesting political stuff that was sort of hidden beneath the surface. When I watched the movie, the 1961 movie, I was, I didn't even think about politics at all, but it was really once I began working on this, that I began to realize that, oh my God, this whole text is, the entire thing from beginning to end is sort of an indirect approach to the Japanese political questions at the time.
Yeah, it is wild to see. I believe the total page count comes out to
It's small.
less. Yeah, it's less than. I had the page count right. It's 40. It's about 44 pages.
Okay.
Yeah, in terms. So it's a novella. Like it reads. But the thing is, though, having watched Mothra probably a dozen times, I think if anybody's listening to this or watching this on YouTube, you've hopefully seen the original Mothra. I'm assuming the grand majority of people have. And the thing with the original Mothra is that the themes that are in this book are tangentially there, but the hologram of America and Russia with it's blanking on the name. Roslika, I believe is what they call the kingdom. Roslikin, thank you.
Yeah.
And the
Basilican or something like that. It's like Russia and American.
Yes,
together.
And it's clear. And the clearly not Japanese guy Nelson, who is the big heavy. Because again, the basic story does take a lot from King Kong as well.
Mm-hmm.
So when you watch the original Mothra, there's a lot of King Kong, except if the ship stole Fei Ray from Kong, and then he actually goes to the city to get her back, to bring her back to the island instead of the other way around. But the elements of the political intrigue are clearly knocked down, other than here are these foreigners that are they're less than scrupulous, we'll just put it that way. And here's the stand-in for New York City, but it's really not really New York. It's kind of Russia. It's kind of New York. It's something else. And this is where we're going to give the fairies back to Mothra. That's the whole kind of big climax. I mean, as to be fair, as a little kid, Mothra, when I finally saw it, I was like, oh man, this is going to be great. And I kind of sat there and I saw it when I was 10 years old for the first time. I'm like, it's not a lot going on in this movie. Like, at the time, I'm like, the fairies are cool and stuff, but I'm like, I'm tuning in to watch monster fights because I'm a 10-year-old boy, But as an adult, you're like, oh, okay, this falls in more in line with that early batch, what I call the pre-King Kong versus Godzilla batch of Toho monster movies, where each one had some kind of like subtext to it of political, dealing with the atomic bomb stuff, that kind of stuff. This story definitely has a lot of that. You can definitely see where Tanaka, Honda, and Tsuburaya were. Let's curtail that back and then show more of our big rubber, caterpillar. That way, we have people tuning in, and we get some kids to get in, because we're making a movie at the end of the day. But reading this was wildly eye-opening, because while the base story is the same as what we got in the movie, there are so many details, especially for a 44-page novella, that every time I turn the page, I'm like, this was not in the movie. This element was not in the movie. And it's wild to watch. And the undertone of the political aspect, especially if you know at least a smidgen of your post-war Japanese history, especially when we were occupying them still. You're like, oh yeah, they were not happy with us being there for as long as we were, and you could definitely tell that that shines through quite heavy, especially in that last third, at least I'll call it the last act of the book. And at the same time, that author, as you said, you mentioned, like he's a very intellectually heavy author, also decides to send Mothra, spoilers, into an alternate dimension at the end of the book, to which I'm like, I sat there like, what?
Oh, I know. I was like, I wish I saw that in the film.
Yeah.
I had to reread it twice.
It felt like we need some kind of
understand.
sci-fi element, some Robert Heinlein level stuff in this. And also a little bit of, I'm sorry, and also a little bit, I don't know how to end this. So what are we doing with a giant moth that's, the size of a Harrier jet? He's going into space and into an alternate dimension and sucking a satellite with them. Credits. Insane. Absolutely insane.
It is really funny.
How did you feel with the change? No, it's okay. I was gonna say, how do you feel with the changes? Like, to me, obviously, the biggest ones is the origin. I mean, and then 4 of them to 2 of them, but the fairy, that could be explained. But the origin and the ending when she goes into space. Like, how do you feel?
Yeah, I'm not exactly sure why the last author decided to send Mothra off into space. And I mean, I guess, some of the other movies, the other Toho movies had, involved aliens and so on. We already had at that point the Mysterians, and we had and so, Toho, I think, was leaning at least a little bit in outer space kind of direction at some points, but it does feel pretty random. It's at the end of the novella when Mothra flies off, skimmed through the Andromeda galaxy before entering another realm of space, some sort of anti-world. Of course.
Oh my god, it's such 1960s sci-fi pulp stuff, like the atomic age. When we were just learning about this stuff, and this was all the buzzwords. Like when you read any sci-fi at that time, it is smack dab in there. After about 5-6 pages of Mothra, and again, as you said, they gloss over Mothra doing Mothra stuff. Like, what is essentially the last 35-40 minutes of the movie is 8 pages of Mothra actually doing stuff. And it was done purpose, as you noted in the book. It was done on purpose because the screenwriter, when they were going to translate this thing, they're like, this is just, in screenwriting parlance, this is just all exposition. You fill in and you're going to visually represent it. So you do what you're going to do. But here are the big beats. Like, Mothra still comes ashore, attacks Tokyo, cocoons on the diet building, and then they hit the heat lamp, takes off, fairies, credits. Like, that chain of events still happens, but goes off into a weird I had to stop and reread that section a couple of. I'm like,
yes. And the thing is, like, I imagined it in my mind. So then I gaslit myself and was like, did I see it in the movie? So at 1 a.m, I went to go watch the ending of the film. And I was like, all right, it was just so well written and well translated that I was able to kind of imagine it in my mind. Just like I imagined the creation origin scene in my mind. I was like, wait, that's not what actually happened. So I didn't get to watch the whole Mothra movie again. So I was just basically rewatching those 2 main scenes. I know for sure it was 2 fairies and not 4. That I did not gaslight myself. But the other, I was like, I know it's 2. But the creation part, I was like, wait a minute, the thing is, but your translation was so well and so detailed that I saw it in my mind. But then I was like, I don't think that's in the film because it's been a long time since I've rewatched it. I've only watched it twice. And so I went back, watched that scene. It was not in there.
Right.
How did you feel about the change? And do you think a part of it is because of budget? They made it a lot more reality-based friendly than like needing all of the special effects.
Totally. That's a really perceptive point. I personally love this creation myth story. Just for people who aren't familiar yet, in the second part of the book, the part that was written by the second author, Takehiko Fukunaga, he was a guy who's very interested in mythology and sort of ancient thought, and so he took his own kind of personal interest and applied it to the story. And he created a long creation myth for Infant Island, which supposedly our Japanese scientists learned when they were there kind of doing research there on Infant Island. And so that portion of the book is maybe 2 or 3 pages, but I found it, like you, I found it to be one of the most interesting parts of the book. And I really felt like the writer had spent quite a lot of time thinking about it, creating a creation myth that sounded a little bit like the Japanese creation myth, but went off in some very interesting, quirky directions. And so, obviously he spent a lot of time on it. And so when I read that, I was very excited by it. And that's another reason I thought, oh gosh, this is going to be great to translate, because people will probably enjoy this. But I think you're absolutely right, Jessica, and putting your finger on the main point is that it would be really hard to film those creation myth scenes. It would require a whole new set of clothing, a whole new backgrounds drop. It would require a lot of work on the part of Tsuburaya's special effects team, and so. So I think that that the screenwriter Sekizawa, when he sat down to turn this novella into the screenplay, I think he just decided that it was too much of a distraction, perhaps too much of a cost to the studio. So they just decided to leave that out. Instead of putting that in, they decided to do a little something else in the film that that kind of hints at Mothra's origins. In the viewers of the film probably remember that that in Infant Island, in the cave where Mothra's egg was housed, there's a kind of mysterious set of writing on the wall and symbols that are not Japanese. They're not related to any East Asian language. They're just sort of mysterious kind of pictographs. And the main character, Chujo, who's the linguist in the film, looks at this inscription and somehow almost miraculously figures out that one of the symbols means Mothra. And then so we get like a little bit of the, a kind of like introduction of and then later on that same image kind of recurs at the end of the film when we see a Christian cross with the sun rising behind it and with like rays coming out that kind of look like the wings of a butterfly a bit. And so, the film inserted another kind of backstory for Mothra and a kind of quasi-religious symbolism using that technique rather than using what was originally here in the novella. Honestly, I was I'm a little bit disappointed that Toho Studios did not film.
Yeah,
it would have been just so freaking cool. But also too, the creation story I think is really helpful, because in the book it shows the rich humanity, the rich imagination of the native Infant Islanders. It really kind of shows that they're not sort of like primitive, backward, unintellectual people. That they're actually, this in the book at least, they're a people that's very closely attuned to their environment. They're living in connection with nature. They've managed to figure out how to live with radiation successfully. They're relatively peaceful. In fact, they're very noble to when outsiders come. And so there's nothing but extremely positive imagery of the Infant Islanders in the novella. Viewers of the film probably remember that like the scenes with the Infant Islanders are very sort of exoticized, and they kind of look like they're right out of a tiki bar or something like that. And in some of the scenes, I feel like the Infant Islanders are kind of portrayed as like a little bit almost Neanderthal-like. They're kind of scowling and so on. So I think that the removal of the creation story, which shows part of the humanity and the rich imagination and rich traditions of the Infant Islander, I sort of regret the loss of that in the film. But that's just me.
I mean, it is such a wild, especially for for longtime fans, like, again, it's you hit on something, the fact that, like, oh, this is such a great idea, and then they took it out. That is kind of the MO of Toho from the entire 90s. Like, when you go back and look at the concepts of what their movies are, like, you just have to look at the posters that they gave, the idea to Noriyoshi Orai. They're like, paint this because this is what the movie's going to be, and then it looks nothing like what his paintings offer. It's like if you told Frazetta, like, hey, we're making Howard the Duck, so paint us Howard the Duck, and then you got the George Lucas Howard, and you're like, this is nothing that they promised me on the poster. Yeah, that's about the MO. But the fact of giving, like, Mothra a definitive origin that is so wild. I mean, and again, it does. I'm trying to find words to put this. It feels like that. It's about 2 pages, roughly, or a page and a half, 2 pages.
Yeah,
It felt like as you went deeper and deeper, like, this just kept going and going, because it's like all good myths. They just keep building and building upon themselves. And I'm like, what the hell? And again, knowing that we were going to interview you, I can only imagine. I'm like, God bless this man, because he had to translate this for us, English speakers, and figure out how am I conveying this to people without it sounding like I'm just pulling this out of thin air kind of thing.
Yeah.
And you did a masterful job, by the way. I'm going to give you your kudos right there.
Thank you. I mean, I have to say that part was so much fun for me, and as I mentioned before, I do feel like Fukunaga really did a good job writing that section, so it was a joy to translate. Some of the other parts that were sketchier, some of the other parts that were a little bit vaguer, were less personally satisfying to translate. But that's hands down my favorite passage of the book. When we went to G-Fest 2 years ago, and I was just beginning to talk about the idea of doing this, I offered to read that passage because I had recently finished it, and the audience said, "Oh yeah, let's do it." So I read it for the audience there, and I got a really amazing response. So I think that people seem to enjoy it, and yeah, I hope the readers enjoy it too.
Yeah.
And
you did it justice, because I don't want people to read it and be like,
I think Jessica froze.
Anna, he just started making up stuff, wrote that entire section, and Jeff. Oh, did I freeze?
Yeah, you're good.
Okay, am I still here?
Yeah, you're still there.
Okay. No, I said what I loved about your translation is, as I read it, I believed that was the myth that you were writing, and that I didn't want people to be like, Jeffrey was high at that time and just gave up and just started writing whatever he wanted, because this man decided he didn't want to translate for 3 pages and then did it. But it actually sounded like real, like believable, that the native people of Infant Island believed in that, and it made total sense. And we live in a world where we hear all kinds of things, right? But it made sense, and it didn't sound like you were making up something that you just read.
Yeah. Well, I promise you that that the translation portion of the book, it's all there. I did my best to.
Oh no, you did a great job.
Well, while we
afterward, it's where some of my individual thoughts come through. So if feel free to criticize me as much as you want there.
Well, while we're on the topic there, let's talk about the work of the translation, because now it's a kind of a double stacked question here. So one, obviously you're fairly fluent in Japanese if you're translating a Japanese novel, but it is the translating from one language to another and also giving it prose. Let's go into that, and then add the double-decker sandwich of now 3 different writers and trying to translate each of their individual proses, and then making it palatable for at least the English-speaking audience.
Yeah,
it's fiction, It's not based. Do you know what I mean? So, like, if it was a autobiography, that's a little bit different, right? It's more straight to A to B.
Right. No, that's a really good point. One of the things, well, let me say this. So one of my goals when I sat down to do this, I figured that the biggest audience would be people like us, who like big monsters, and people who know the film and are interested in the film and in that world. And so that knowing that or having that in my mind, I think was very liberating. I felt like I didn't necessarily need uh, to sort of misrepresent the text or anything. In fact, I felt like when I sat down to translate it, my biggest goal was to show people what the novella looked like before it was made into the movie. I mean, that was my primary goal in doing this. And so that meant that was yeah, let me put it this way. That was a really kind of freeing concept, because if my goal is to show the book as accurately as possible, then I don't necessarily need to sort of polish over some of the inconsistencies in style, because it's there in the original, and that's okay. And that's part of the weird, quirky charm of this very strange little novella here. So when it came to translating the very different styles of the three authors, I just tried to let them, come through as themselves, as their own individuals. I didn't try to fill in any places or smoothen, over things. In fact, if anything, I tried to kind of highlight some of the kind of quirky, odd places in the book, and there's plenty of them. So, yeah. Did that make sense?
Yes, and that's the beauty of citations at the bottom of the book too. Those were fun. Like as I got down, I'm like, oh, hey, what do we got here? And then you literally, it's like Ferris Bueller stopping the movie for a second, going like, see, this is what's going on here. All right, let's get back to the show, kind of thing. There's something I always love about citations when it's used in just even doing its purpose. But that is the wonderful thing about you popping in every once in a while as the translator. Like, so just let you know, like, Mothra is referred to as a dude here.
As a he, yes, I saw that. Right? It's he, and then a she. And even at the beginning, when you wrote, this is how the author's names have chosen to appear when I credit them in the front of the book, because this is how they wanted their names to be. I loved that detail, because I saw that, and then I also saw as someone in my mom's from Taiwan, and so Jessica saying is how in America, but then when you speak to somebody in your native language, the last name is first.
Yeah,
so they call me by my last name. And so I really liked that, and I knew I was in for a thrill ride when I saw that Mothra was referred to as a he, and then you wrote down on the bottom, like, you didn't leave any room for unanswered questions, which was good, because I didn't want to really come to the interview and be like, hey, why did you call her a he? Like, you addressed it, and you even addressed it in the bibliography afterwards. It's like Godzilla was always called an it. It's just over time, we were like, he, I guess in the patriarch, like, I think automatically, in the society that we're in, every dog is like, hey, you're a good boy. It's a girl dog. I find that out later, but it's how we name it. And I liked how you actually did that, because Mothra was one of the few female kaijus. And so when it said he, that stuck out a lot more. But you did a great job. Chris said with the citation popping in and like, hey, so this is what happened. And I don't know if there's like a space issue, right? You said there was a space, like a manuscript, like an actual technical error maybe, or something like that.
So yeah, there's some I can't explain why exactly. In the Japanese text, there are 4 places, all within a very close proximity to each other, where the word he, kare, is used 4 times. And I've always, like probably almost everyone here, I'd always thought of Mothra as female, and when I encountered that in this text, I was like, hold on a second, what the heck's going on here? I realized that up until that point, there were no gendered pronouns at all used to refer to Mothra, which until that point in the book had been in either the egg stage or the larva stage. And so, the fact that there were no gendered pronouns at those stages didn't bother me. I didn't even think about it, because it's like, an egg, is that an he or she? It's probably
Yeah.
it. In English, that's probably what we would say. But once we get to like Mothra's, later forms, when we suddenly refer to them as he, that was really hugely surprising to me. And then almost immediately, all the pronouns drop away again. And so I was like, what's going on here? As I began to think about it afterward, I mean, I realized that like the gendering of Mothra as female may have come after, after these authors sat down to write this book. That might not have even really been an issue in their minds at all. But definitely when we move down the line and we get the English translations of the films and subtitles and so on, those things help to kind of firmly establish Mothra, at least in the international imagination, as female. And so like as a translator, I felt a little bit stuck. Like, what am I supposed to do with these these four masculine pronouns that are used to refer to Mothra? Again, my goal was to show people what was in this very, very quirky book, not rather than hide things. My first thought was like, that must be a mistake, but then I began thinking, maybe Mothra hasn't been clearly, definitively gendered yet at this point in Mothra's early development. But nonetheless, as a translator, I have to figure out what to do. So I decided to use it, for the part where there's no pronouns at all. Then where the he is in the book, I used he because I wanted to be, faithful to the book. But then after that, once Mothra goes into the sort of fuller moth butterfly-like phase, there's one more transformation involved. And so I figured, well, Mothra undergoes so many transformations. Mothra is very much all about transformation, so why couldn't one of those transformations be in terms of gender? So in the last part of the book, I use the feminine pronoun she, because I figured that that's perhaps just one more way. It could be one more way in which Mothra transforms, and that's not precluded by the original book. It's just the book is just vague. English, I really dislike the fact that in English we're so compelled to use pronouns like he, she, they, which imply something about gender. Wouldn't it be nice if we could just leave all that aside and have neutral pronouns?
Yeah, I did see you had, and I'm sure we'll get to it, which was your opinions and afterward, which absolutely loved. It was one of those moments that when I'm reading, I'm sitting back, but when you're really into something, you lean forward. So when it got to your afterward, I was like, oh, this is very interesting. Like, this is something new to me, very detailed oriented and things I didn't think about. And one of the things is, you wanted to stand up for all those that are part of the queer community. And you even said, like, as someone who understands and knows it on a personal and deep level, but also the fact that like she could be seen as like transformation, transgender, for those who feel the need of representation identity. I love that because I never thought about it that way, because I never knew he was called a he, until now. But also I was like, oh, that hate mail is coming for Jeffrey. However, they can't blame you. This was in the original source. It was, and one of the authors, if not all of them, is progressive, right? We know that Fukunaga-san wrote a great queer story as well. So I was like, oh, Jeffrey did a great job. I never thought about it that way, literally till that moment. But also I was like, oh,
I was definitely, no, you're right. I am a little bit nervous about whether some people might see me as like being too like activist in terms of my translation. But yeah, I mean, I have some friends who are transgender and really like Mothra a great deal, and like Mothra because of the transformation aspect. And so, I really wanted to honor those friends and honor their love for Mothra and help, make sure that that is not something that's lost. I really wanted to bring that forward. And, as someone who's, a gay man myself, I really have, strong feelings about, the need to create representations and how helpful that can be. So, I definitely wanted to be on that side of the story. It was fun. I really enjoyed it. I spent a lot of time, especially thinking about Mothra's gender. That's one of the biggest issues in this book.
Yeah.
Did it at all come off that at this point? I mean, I think you kind of touched on it, but it looks like, as you said, they didn't really assign anything at that moment because they're, I think we forget this was an assignment for these guys.
Right.
Yeah, this was. I mean, Tanaka basically went to them and were like, "I need another giant monster movie, so I need you to come up with something." And we now all, the fandom, like, that is she is unofficial. I think officially now Queen of the Monsters. That was an unofficial title for a long time, and I think Toho has embraced that portion of it. I mean, it's kismet that this book is coming out when it's coming out, because not only is the 65th anniversary of the story and of the original movie, but it's now this year's the 30th anniversary of the Mothra trilogy that came out once they killed off Godzilla, and they're like, Hollywood's going to handle that. Then we saw what happened. So while there's not going to be any Toho produced Godzilla movies, we're going to get Mothra. And the irony of ironies is that the Mothra that they introduced in that movie, it was the first time Toho said themselves, like, this is the first male Mothra. That Mothra has got the moniker Mothra Leo. So Toho did themselves always make a big deal, like, no, this is our girl monster. And I think that resonate because a lot of women resonate with, Godzilla Mothra versus Godzilla, the original one, was one of the biggest grossing films of the entire series. And Toho looked at it and they're like, there's a lot of women coming to see this Godzilla movie, which the last one, it was a lot of dudes because it's King Kong Godzilla. Like, you want to talk about like a wash with masculinity. You have basically two bros, just in a bar fight out. Like, they just got drunk and they're like, let's take this outside. That is 1000% what that movie is. Where this one, where Mothra versus Godzilla, there is a much more feminine. I'm stumbling over my words today. Feminine accent to the movie, and that, I think, is something that Toho has always leaned heavily into. So the fact that they didn't assign anything off the bat, you can honestly argue that this is kind of just a rough draft of what is to be, and that's Absolutely. Part of the reason I love this, because this is we're seeing the foundation, the blueprint with this,
right,
and seeing what the films and what actually fandom has helped mold it over the years out of it. So I look at that, when I read that part, I'm like, yeah, there's a part of me as the fan, I'm like, yeah, Mothra's a girl, but at the same time, I have to remind myself, like, they're still figuring this stuff out. Like, they're literally making this up as they're going along. So it's just all I harken back to Jessica, where I'm like, I just feel bad for this dude, because now he's having to handle an author who probably was up smoking 20 packs of cigarettes, chomping this thing out at 3 a.m. and just went because he had a Freudian slip at one point. And now 65 years later, you're sitting here like, is it a he or she? Okay, now, the citation time. And that's where you step in like Wayne and Garth, in the middle of the movie, and just like, this is the ending? No. And you do the doodaloo thing. So you gotta lay down some foundation. But again, the pros, like, going back to the question of the pros of 3 different authors, because translating is one thing. And as Jessica said, there's a difference between translating nonfiction text of just, here's information. It's an info dump, where this is conveying, like, fiction is a very different beast than nonfiction. And for a lot of people that don't read a lot, I've talked to people who don't read a lot of books, and they don't understand the difference between the two. You have three different authors, and each one has their own style, and you have made this flow so well.
Oh, good.
And I compliment you, because at no point does it feel like there's 3. It doesn't feel like that there's a discombobulation of voices in this translation. It does feel like it flows as one story. Yes. And yes, again, this is me giving you your kudos as my brain is spinning like a top, trying to come up with the little, idioms to translate it out there. So,
and also words that don't exist.
Oh.
And that's a big one. And I know one of the big ones in Harry Potter is chocolate frog, is one of their foods. Now a frog exists, so does chocolate. But in another translation, it was a chocolate turtle. And those are already two words that exist.
Mhm.
You know what I mean? And so I can't imagine how much more difficult it was for you for words that don't even have an origin in reality.
Well,
In our reality.
Yeah, speaking of that kind of word, the word shobijin, that's used to refer to the fairies, is a word that doesn't really ordinarily exist in Japanese. That word is a combination of the character small, sho, and then bijin, which means like beautiful person or beautiful woman usually. And so, the screen, the writers, they just sort of made up that word to refer to the little fairies. They wanted to refer to them as beautiful, but like if you imagine a big, tall, woman, it's a different impression. So the writers added the character show in front of it, and so I thought, well, what should I do with that? At first, my first draft, I just translated it as little beauties. But then as I kept on talking to my fellow Mothra fans, all of my Mothra fan friends know the word shobijing. They've heard the word and seen it in the subtitles and so on. So I decided, oh, okay, well, it's all right to leave that word in and give a little nod to the fandom and say, like, look, I hear you. I'm one of you. I'm using your words.
And
So,
I applaud you on that, because yes, that is if you're a fan of this stuff, you've seen that word so many times at this point. So
right.
um,
And so honestly, when I sent this to the draft to the publisher, the publisher came back to me and they're like, what is this word shobijin in here? We don't this isn't in the dictionary. What you got to do something to explain it. I'm like, oh, I guess I have to. So there's another place where I put a footnote in the text saying like, this is a word that means, and it was a word that was made up for a neologism that was created for this film.
on that same, I noticed you also left kaiju. I'm sorry. I also noticed you left kaiju in there as well too.
Right.
Yeah, that I mean, basically would just translate to monster. But I again appreciate that. Those little things of like, in the parlance of comic books, we'll just put it this way. It's how modern comic book movies are like. You know what? We don't have to worry about like trying to explain everything. We can introduce Dormammu in a Doctor Strange movie, and he's a big floaty, burning head, and people are just going to go along with it. They're like, we understand, we get it.
Nice.
It's seeing stuff like that. I'm like, yes, you didn't dumb it down. You translated it, you gave it a flow, and you still kept it, because this book is definitely aimed at a core audience. Like, this is like I said at the top of the show, this is a deep cuts piece of literature that very few on the English speaking side have ever got to read. And so going with that mindset of like, I can leave certain things here because the people who are picking up this book most likely are going to know these references off the top. And, for those who may not, like, that's what citations are for. And again, my applause to you on that.
Thank you. The word kaiju also, I had a discussion with my editors at University of Minnesota Press, not with this book, but with the Godzilla Raids Again. I in that book too, I left the word kaiju in a couple of times. Sometimes when it appeared, I would translate it as monster, but I left it in a number of times because for exactly the same reason. I wanted to show readers that, yes, this is the language you use. This is the language that I use, and so I wanted to keep that in there and not just, cater only to people that are, know nothing about Godzilla. I wanted to, show that I see you guys. But then, like, for instance, the word kaiju, it's I looked it up in the Oxford English Dictionary, and it's now officially listed as an English word. It's been lexicalized, as we would say in linguistics. It's been turned into an English word. But there was a little kind of small thing. If you were to follow the romanization system that I use throughout the book consistently, over the final U of the word kaiju, there should be like a little line, which is kaiju. Like, so you hold on to the U sound and extend it. Kaiju. It's not kaiju. It's not, the U sound's not short. Kaiju. So anyway, but like, so should I leave the little line on? And my editor is like, well, no, because it's now in the English dictionary, and then the English dictionary doesn't have a little line on it. So it's like, even some of these like little decisions about like whether we keep the word or not, it's like, I have to think then about, well, then how do we spell it? Do we spell it the English way, or do we spell it the Japanese way? And, you can just,
and
thinking about
that
these
is, and I'm sorry, I don't mean to interrupt you, but that is also another point, because if you're going to be super nerdy about this, like the actual terminology would be daikaiju, because it's giant monster, where kaiju is just monster. But thanks to Pacific Rim, and I blame Pacific Rim for this, like kaiju, honestly, more than anything else over Godzilla, I think Pacific Rim has locked in kaiju into the lexicon of pop culture. Like, it really started rolling out after that movie, and then Godzilla blew up to my heart finally with the general audience, other than just being these dumb little movies. But Pacific Rim, God bless the author, but he was just like, yeah, the kaijus, that's all we call them. Like, yeah, but there's okay, Japanese isn't your first language, so who cares? We get the same point. And now that is in the I'm not sure if the people at Oxford are like linguistical talents in Japanese language, but I'm pretty sure there's some Japanese folks who are like, it's this, but it's Americans. Americans are going to American. So, but I am happy that you did leave those in for, especially us, more seasoned fans that were like, yes, we live and breathe this stuff, so you don't need to dumb it down for us. Thank you.
I actually looked at it. It's a Jima and a Jigo as well. A Jigo or a Jigo. Like, those words. Now, I have not looked them up yet. Like, was there how you translated them? Because those were words that people are not going to be familiar with, even though they're familiar with kaiju.
Right. Those, for people who haven't read it yet, those are two names that appear in the creation myth portion of the book. That was relatively straightforward in that case, because in Japanese, those words were spelled out phonetically, and there was no kanji or hanzi. There was no characters that would tell you the meaning of the words. It was just a sound. So I was just able to take the Japanese sound and replace it. These are words that were referring to the ancient gods of Infant Island, and so I was able to just kind of keep it as it was in the original Japanese there. But since we're talking about kaiju, I thought that this might be something fun to add. During one of my many deep dives over the last few years, I took a look at a bunch of old Japanese dictionaries. When I was in Japan, I went to a library that had tons and tons of dictionaries on the shelf. There were, decades of dictionaries. I started looking up the word kaiju to see, where it would appear. And like the word existed before Godzilla 1954. In fact, it looks like I went to some dictionaries of Chinese too, and found out that this word had existed in Chinese centuries and centuries ago. But it's a little bit unclear sometimes in Chinese whether or not the words are just happen to be next to each other. Like the word kai, which means like scary or mysterious or weird. In Chinese is read guai, and that one, it's an adjective, and so it's right in front of the word that means beast or monster. And so it's difficult to know if that was like the two were a single set word, or if they were like just an adjective plus a noun. So but anyway, so that combination though did exist in Old Chinese. So, but the point is that like it seems that I don't know about Chinese as much, but in Japanese, that word kaiju was, although it had existed, it was barely ever used until Godzilla 1954. And suddenly, in all the press around Godzilla 1954, the big first Japanese big monster movie, that word is used all the time in the press. And so suddenly that word kaiju explodes into all the dictionaries in Japanese. And it becomes like a mainstream word, whereas before it wasn't really. So, I mean, we have the kaiju verse, as I like to call it, the Godzilla, Toho universe, and so on. I really think, it brought that word into our popular parlance in the Japanese language first, and then into English later. So Godzilla has a lot of cultural power to affect our languages. I guess that's my point here.
You're preaching to the choir. You're preaching this to a kid that used to say this all the time, and people would just like, they're goofy movies. Like, what are you going on? I'm like, no, there's more here. There's more.
I
like,
know.
and it's been and it's been something I've hammered on the show time and time. Jessica has gotten just an earful of it over and over again in my ranting and ravings on the show. But as you know, I have said this time and time again. I'm like, this is it's the best time. We live in at least for this fandom, this is the best time to be alive. And I scream at these kids, I'm like, appreciate what you got, because none of you, and again, I feel like an old man yelling at a cloud at this point. I'm just like, appreciate, because some of us went through the drought. Some of us went through where these movies were not taken seriously. Like, I had to go down to shady dirt Comic-Con shows and buy them from a dude in like a Slayer t-shirt who got a bootleg from another dude, and I had to pay him $20 and then go home and hope to whatever God that was out there that would listen that this thing played right, because he did not have a VCR to show me like I got the good stuff, man, because I had been screwed before. And I'm like, really? That is the world we had to live in. Not you just like, I'm going on whatever torrent site right now and I'm downloading this because that is the world I live in. I'm like, no, you have it too good. And not only that, but like the cup doth overflow at this point. There's just so much. Like, again, the fact that 10 years ago when Jessica and I started this podcast, it was right after Pacific Rim came out. And this, I've said before, I'll say it again, this show was Jessica's idea. She's like, I want to talk about monsters. And I went, okay, but why with me? And she's like, because you know what you're talking about. I'm like, okay, yes, this is the one thing I do know in life more than anything else. I don't have many other skills, but this I do have. But when we sat down to come on, it was like, okay, the legendary movies coming out next year. There's stuff here. There's all this history that maybe we can go into, but maybe we'll make it work. And now 10 years later, and we're sitting here with you at the beginning of 2026 talking about the Mothra novella, which was just whispered about because no one could find, like, you had to go to Japan, you had to know the language, you had to know what you're looking for, and then read it and then tell someone what was going on, because we, none of us can speak the language. And now you can just walk into a Barnes and Noble and pick it up, which everyone who's listening should be doing right now. So
thank you.
It is a great time to be a fan of this stuff.
I think so.
Yeah.
TED Talk. Thank you.
It's okay.
Your comments about getting the bootleg copies reminded me of my own story that was a little bit like that. When people all the time ask me, what's your favorite of the various movies? What's your favorite Godzilla movie? What's your favorite Mothra movie? Whatever. When it comes to Godzilla, my favorite probably of the whole Godzilla series is a Godzilla versus Hedorah. The smog monster, and I remember seeing like a rerun of it, on Saturday morning one day back, probably in the 1970s, and I was like, it was the weirdest thing I'd ever seen. It's super trippy as a movie even now. I think it's 2026, but it was like, to my little 8-year-old brain, it just like. So I wanted for years and years and years to find that one. I didn't remember the title of it. So but it was only many, many years later that I was finally able to see it again. but yeah, it was just so difficult to put your hands on the material back then.
It very much was. Like, my dad was an artist, and he loved comic books. He loved, and he didn't love he loved the characters, but he wasn't so much into the writing as he was into the art. Like, this is a
Mm.
man. Like, by the time I was 5, I knew more about Frank Frazetta, Boris Vallejo, um and Neil Adams than I did my ABCs, because that's all I heard this man. That and Edwin Austin Abbey. That's all my dad would rant and rave about. And if you looked at my father, you're like, how in the hell do you know this stuff? Because he looked like the dude from The Big Lebowski if he had a haircut. That was my father. But he would take me to, I grew up out in LA, and we would go to the Shrine Show, which we kind of called the dirt show, because it was a little bit of a dirt show. Like, the Shrine Auditorium back in the 90s was not a great place to be. It kind of sucked. Still sucks a little bit today. But the first time he took me there, because he was, I was into dinosaurs, and he was like, we kind of get along, but like, I need that thing that bridges, the relationship. Like, he was desperately trying to get me into comic books. So he would take me to these shows. He's like, son, Batman, Spider-Man, one of these. And I just went, that guy has a bunch of videotapes over there. And I walked in, I'm like, is that Godzilla versus Mothra? And this big dude's like, yeah, it's $20. And I just begged my dad, and my dad's like, is it in English? And the guy's like, of course it's not in English. Like, no, this thing, I just got this thing last week. It came out in Japan like 6 months ago. So, but he had Destroy All Monsters, and Destroy All Monsters was a very hard movie to come by. Out in LA, we got the usual roster: Megalon, Gigan, Godzilla 1985 were played constantly on our local KTLA station, but no Destroy All Monsters. And that was the holy grail, because all the monsters were in it. So when I found that, I lost my mind. And when I relay this to kids, when we go to like G Fest, or I'm working shows with my buddy, these other Comic Cons, and I'm hearing kids complain about like Crunchyroll doesn't have the new episode of One Piece up. I had to go bootleg it. I'm like, oh my god, your lobster's too buttery. Your steak is too tender. Like, do you have any idea what I had to? It sounds like I'm trying to go and buy drugs, but I'm trying to pick up a bootleg copy of a Godzilla movie. Like, we had to get in cars and go and find someone that had this stuff. And that was always the thing. And again, like, it's just coming around to, not only do I have the Mothra book, once again, by the University of Minnesota Press. Everyone listening should go buy their copy right now. But we also have the translation of the first 2 Godzilla stories as a nice collection. Never in a million years would I have ever thought that we would see these on the American shores, because that was way too deep cuts 10 years ago. It completely ignored 20 years ago. No one would have touched this stuff. Absolutely no one, because Godzilla was seen as, it's kind of jokey. That's the thing. And then all of a sudden, like, the Legendary movies came out, and it captured the imagination of a whole new generation. Then we got Shin Godzilla, and folks were like, oh, this is what, and then -1 just blew everyone out there. They're like, this is what a Godzilla movie could be. I'm like, yes. Go look at the other stuff. As you said, like Hedorah. Like, I love Godzilla versus Hedorah. It's one of my absolute favorites. And I always joked, it's like Hunter S. Thompson sat down and wrote a Godzilla movie with environmental themes, because this is such a mind trip movie. But it also showed, like, there's such diversity, and the character's so malleable that you can tell all these wild, wacky stories. And it's like Baskin Robbins. There's 31 flavors to everything.
It's really nice. I mean, I love the fact that Mothra, Godzilla, these characters that we know and love have been able to develop so much over the years. I mean, the Godzilla series and all of its manifestations has covered a gigantic amount of cultural territory. It's been used to represent so many different ideas, and many variations on similar kinds of ideas. I think it's really a testament to the power of filmmaking that we've been able to see these monsters come back in different guises, with slightly different meanings over and over for decades, and still people are not board. People are more fans, I think, than ever.
Yeah.
That's the beauty about. Oh, go ahead.
No, it's okay. No, that is what. No, I was gonna say. Earlier, Jeffrey, you talked about. Well, Chris brought up like deep diving, and you were like all of my research, and I didn't want to gloss over the afterword, because obviously a lot of the afterword is about the political and the war and a lot of things we've already covered. But Dr. Dolittle was not something I had expected to see. And I absolutely love the Dr. Dolittle series, along with the fact that the last time it was somewhat relevant was Robert Downey Jr.'s and there's that studio's take on it, which I don't know how it did financially in the box office. I went to go see it. But Dr. Dolittle, regardless of whether people read it or not, is familiar with the character. They were like, oh, it's a man who talks to animals, like in all, simply put. However, you had quite a bit of a section in there, even down to images and pictures that came from that. And I absolutely love that. And I did not see that coming. Like, I didn't make the connection because I'm a Dr. Dolittle fan and I should have made some sort of loose pipeline connection, but I didn't because it also predated it. It predates Mothra. Yeah. So I loved that. And I loved how much research you had to go into that, actually.
Thank you. Thank you. That was a really fun discovery. And it all came about because very early on, when I was talking about this project with my husband, he loves Dr. Dolittle, and so he said when I was talking about, should I do this project or not? He's like, well, yeah. I mean, Dr. Dolittle and Mothra, there's that obvious connection there, and I'm like, hold on a second, there's that obvious connection there. Like,
obvious.
What? I was like, I think Jessica, you probably knew more about Dr. Dolittle than I did when I went into this project. But like, once he made that comment, just like as if it was the most obvious thing in the world, I'm like, hold on a second. And so I quickly ran to the internet and started reading all the Dr. Dolittle books. I think there are 12 of them, and 3 of them feature a gigantic butterfly called Jamaro Bumblelily, I think. And in one of the books, Jamaro Bumblelily takes Dr. Dolittle and his companions to the moon on an adventure. And so when I read that particular book in the series, I was astonished because not only the similarity of the gigantic butterfly and moth, but there was also like lots of other tiny small plot points that have things to do with the Luminous Fairies and Mothra. Like there he encounters creatures of different sizes. There he encounters vampire plants that suck blood. And there was all these kind of similarities to Luminous Fairies and Mothra that I began to realize that there's no way that this was a coincidence. There had to be this clear line of connection. And when I looked into the history of the Dr. Dolittle books translations into Japanese, I found that the timeline fit perfectly. Not only was it someone that they knew and admired who did the Dr. Dolittle translations, the translation of that particular book came out the exact same year that Mothra came out. So it's just like too many coincidences are lining up for it to be, just sheer happenstance. So that's why I got like, I was so excited by this that I went down a deep rabbit hole, and I ended up talking a lot about that similarity in the back of the book because it was just like too much to ignore. And in reading all the various books that existed in English and Japanese about Mothra, I didn't find anybody who went into this connection at all. I mean, there were a couple of people who mentioned, like, I found one book about moths that was written by a scholar who happens to mention Mothra and Dr. Dolittle together, like in the same sentence, but that's it. That's as far as it was. And so I don't know, but yeah, I mean, like looking at that illustration,
yeah, exactly.
It's like that's Mothra right there, isn't it?
Did you ever watch?
So you pioneered something. I want to say you pioneered an entire.
I gotta say, I give all the credit to my husband, but yeah, he's in the next room over there, so I'm pointing in that.
I'm going to go out on a limb and assuming that he prefers the Rex Harrison movie over the Eddie Murphy movies as well, right?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah. Yes.
So, as you're writing this, do you hear Rex Harrison singing, "If I Could Talk with the Animals" over and over in your head, like some like Shining-esque moment of just typing this stuff out?
Well, it's funny that you mentioned the Rex Harrison movie because that
Mhm,
came out a couple of years after Mothra in 1961, and I am
mhm,
100% positive that the writers of the Doctor Dolittle movie from whatever year it was must have been watching Mothra and must have been thinking about it, because there's something in that movie that is right out of the movie Mothra. There's a just like in the final scenes of Mothra, where the creature, the scientists tell everybody to paint the gigantic symbol on the tarmac so that Mothra will come and land. There's almost exactly that same scene in the Doctor Dolittle movie starring Rex Harrison. And that's kind of how the movie ends. The gigantic butterfly or moth, I can't remember, comes
I
down
think it's
and
Butterfly, yeah.
yeah, and then Rex Harrison gets on its back and flies back to London. And so we
Mhm.
see the final scenes are like, Rex Harrison flying off in the back of this gigantic creature to his hometown, to where he's originally from. It's like such a perfect parallel to the end of Mothra. Um, that again, there's no way it could be a coincidence. I'm sure that the creators of the Doctor Dolittle movie must have been drawing upon Mothra for their inspiration.
They had to. I mean, the Godzilla movies at that point in the 60s. So Dr. Dolittle, I'm looking at 67. So we're at the peak of the kaiju boom in Japan. Like we're a year out of Ultraman. We are, I believe, 1 year away from Destroy All Monsters. And those movies, like at the after, I think King Kong versus Godzilla, like AIP was just bringing them all out here. So they were big runs on the drive-in circuit as well as like the double feature circuit. So they,
Yeah,
as much as people kind of poo-poo these movies, they had a cultural impact going all the way back to the 60s. I mean,
absolutely.
just gonna both know people that are like in their 60s. Like I was a little kid when these movies originally came out, and it blew my mind seeing them. I'm like, so yes, like they definitely had their impact as well. And
Yeah.
saying you start bringing that up, I'm like, it's been a minute since I watched Doctor Doolittle, but yeah, there was a little bit of Mothra there in that, and as much as like it, there's absolutely no way that a producer wasn't watching that and
Right,
saying,
right.
yeah, let's do that.
And I love this particular example here because it shows in such an interesting way the way that ideas and images circulated well past international boundaries.
Mhm.
Like here we have Dr. Dolittle written by a guy from the British Isles, who later lived in America, and so we published the Dr. Dolittle books. Those were then translated into Japanese, then influenced Mothra, which was then made into a movie, which was then sent to America, and then that that influenced then the movie starring the British actor Rex Harrison, made in America, and then the movie he goes back to England. So there's like this almost like perfect, like if you look at that connection of influences, there's this a perfect loop, and I think it's such an interesting example of how when people create something, it doesn't exist only in a vacuum. Images and ideas travel far beyond where we ever expect them to go, and isn't that wonderful? I think
That
Yeah,
people.
and so sorry. Keep going,
is
Jeffrey.
yeah,
Oh,
go
it's
ahead.
just to say that, like, I think when people tend to look at like kaiju movies and stuff like that, they might talk about
Mm,
like King Kong and Godzilla, Beast from 20,000 Fathoms, and Godzilla or whatever.
yeah,
But
yeah.
but there's a lot more. I mean, there's a lot more connections to be made, and that's why I got so nerdy excited when I realized that the Doctor Dolittle Mothra connection was absolutely 100% there.
I mean that.
You
Go ahead.
mentioned that in the book. I'm sorry. You mentioned that in the book that it kind of comes back like round robin.
Mhm.
And
Yeah.
despite political and cultural history, there's still a need of people loving something beyond beyond their own country of origin. Like you said, the medium and the story transcends internationally.
Right.
But a lot of us have a lot of history with it. I remember growing up, I watched Godzilla anyways, but my parents, being of Hong Kong and Taiwanese descent, didn't
Huh?
have the best
Mm,
idea of Godzilla due to the
sure.
fact that the origin is Japanese. But
Right.
now it's years later, so they're fine with it now. Um, However, did you ever feel, because as I'm reading this, I'm thinking about it from your point of view, and I was like, I wonder if Jeffrey has ever thought of the fact that it was the Japanese book that's now being translated by an American that was kind of seen as the adversary. Do you think the Japanese people would have been like, never would I thought the enemy would be translating my book? Or would the authors have been like, we're progressive and we like the fact that Jeffrey was, many years from now will be translating our book. Like, I wonder what that feeling is. Do you know what I
Right.
mean? Like, I didn't know
Yeah.
if that irony or that thought ever even crossed your mind.
And no, I didn't think about it in quite those terms, but I see what you mean. I have to hope that that these authors, I mean, because I admire
Yeah.
them. I really do admire these authors, and not just this book, but some of their other work as well. Especially the second author, I just love him, and the third author too. He was an author who I hadn't read before working on this project, but now I think he's one of the greats. I would be thrilled if they knew that I had translated their work into English, because these three were of a progressive mindset. They
Yes.
were all multilingual. They were highly educated. They had been to Japan's institutions of higher learning and stuff like that. They were broad-minded people, and so I'm sure they would have been happy rather than upset or anything like that. But
Yeah, I
um,
was like the the broad Japanese, like how they would feel, right? Because there's always a subsection of people
yeah,
who
yeah,
still think a
right,
certain more conservative
absolutely,
way. And
yes,
but I didn't feel that these three would, but I was like, oh, like
yeah.
people, if they were alive now, I feel like the people then would have been like, never would we have thought in 70 years somebody American would be translating these
I'm
books,
s I'm sure you're right, Jessica. I'm sure that if they looked out to see, like, the fandom that their creation had brought about, I'm sure that all three of these authors would be flabbergasted or astounded. But, what a testament to how,
Yes.
provocative and interesting their monster was, that it's created all these fans that are sitting here in the year 2026, having a fun conversation talking about talking about their work. I just love it. I love it.
On that note, can we dive into Jeffrey the person for a second? How
Oh,
did you get into your I'm gonna throw it out there. You seem to have a love for the Japanese.
yeah, yeah,
What brought you down this path to where you're now translating works
yeah.
of giant monsters?
Yeah, so, my story is not entirely unusual. When I was growing up, I was interested in things from around the world, and I was privileged enough to have to go to a school where I had students who had Japanese parents, who had Taiwanese parents, who had British parents, who had Italian parents, and so on. So it was a slightly more worldly school that I attended than maybe some other people's. But I got the chance when I was in high school at age 15 to go to Japan for the first time, and as a high school exchange student, and I begged my parents to let me go. I really wanted to go anywhere, but by
Mhm.
coincidence, I ended up going to Japan, and it was the right place for me. I realized I was this kid from the Midwest who had from Ohio, flat part of Ohio, and that had hardly ever seen a mountain. And I'd only seen the ocean, like briefly. And so it was so exciting to go as an exchange student to southwestern Japan and live kind of like sort of below the mountains looking out over the sea. And it just was so exciting to me, that I did determined, like, I'm going to master this language. I was also very nerdy, bookish kid. I love to read. And so I was starting out reading novels in translation. but I had right from the beginning my goal to be able to read in Japanese. So I spent many years working towards that. Japanese, as you probably know, is a more complicated language for Western language speakers to learn, especially because of the writing system, which takes a lot of time and a lot of patience to learn. But the difficulty of the Japanese writing system and everything like that just made it more intriguing to me. I'm a person who likes a challenge, and so I just kept with it. And you know, I was so foolish and stupid when I was young. I used to think that like all the good books were translated. Boy, was that ever wrong.
Oh yeah.
Like if like this screen here is the size of the world of Japanese literature, like this much of it has been translated. You know, just like all this other stuff, including a bazillion, you know, pieces of writing about kaiju, you know, novels, you know, one after another, short stories. There's tons and tons of stuff out there for us to read. So you know, I had really wanted to be an author when I was younger. I loved to write. But once I discovered that there was so much good literature out there that hadn't been translated, I just began to feel like, oh, perhaps this is my calling. It, you know, uses my love and interest of the Japanese language in a way that serves, you know, some, you know, writers and content creators that I really love and enjoy. So I just thought that I would try to use whatever little ability I had to try to bring that forward.
And you're doing great work, by the way.
Thank you.
Bravo. And
I
what is your
Oh,
white whale out there right now?
oh gosh. Well, so I've got a lot. I've got this. I always had this mental list of books that I want to translate, so that anytime I find myself in an elevator with someone who might listen, that I can be like, okay, this is what we need to do. This is what we need to do. But in the world of kaiju, let me talk about that more specifically.
Mhm.
There's this long list of non-kaiju related things in my head too that I want to work on. But in the kaiju list, I'd love to do a big anthology at some point of Japanese kaiju stories. Like for instance, the radio play that from 1954 of Godzilla that's never been translated, and that's very different than either the scenario or the final movie or the novella that I translated over there. That's never been translated. I'd love to put that in a collection with maybe some translations of the original novel that inspired the movie Rodin. Or there's a text for Godzilla versus Biollante, and as I said, there's like a lot of other kaiju stories out there that had never been translated or never been made into movies. There's one genius Japanese science fiction writer by the name of Sakyo Komatsu, and who wrote more than like I think 100 books in his lifetime, and he wrote some of the most influential science fiction of the 20th century. He's like the Japanese Isaac Asimov, and he wrote a couple of kaiju works as well that I would love to put into that anthology. So if there's any publisher out there listening, you know, and you'd like to do a kaiju anthology, you know, look me up. There's one more novel that I might mention here because I'm trying to mention it whenever I can because I'm hoping to get someone interested in it. There's a very wonderful Japanese mystery writer. Her name is Miyuki Miyabe. She writes mysteries and historical fiction. Some of her work has been translated, and some of her work has even become bestsellers in America. But she has one 580-page novel that's set about 200 years ago in the past, and it's about a kaiju coming and attacking old Japan. And it's done with so much historical detail and so much like attention to psychology and everything like that, that I think it's the best piece of kaiju fiction that I've ever read. I would love to translate it, and I'm 100% positive that it would make money and that it would find an audience. So,
oh
so
my
it's like,
goodness, what is the name of that one in Japanese? I mean, not that anybody's gonna.
Oh, it's called Kojin, which is written with the characters that mean like the wild god or the rampaging god. So you probably would either translate it the wild god or the rampaging god. But it's so good. It's so good. I just like once I started reading it, I couldn't put it down.
Oh my god, I'm so interested in that one. I'm so interested. Do you know if it's I guess for selfish reasons. Do you know if it's translated into Mandarin Chinese or any other language?
That's a really good question. I don't know about if there's a Chinese translation or not. I'll look that up for you after we get done.
Thank you.
This writer she is so well known. She's one of Japan's biggest mystery historical novelists. So I wouldn't be surprised if she had been translated into Mandarin or some other language. I know that some of her mysteries have been translated into lots of languages. I know some of her mystery. When I was in China once, I saw some of her mystery novels on a shelf there, but I don't remember seeing that one.
Okay.
How much do you personally drop at when you're in Japan? Like I can just assuming you go into like the Mandarake bookstores or adjacent, like maybe a book off, and you're just walking out like that suitcase has got to cost you an arm and a leg to get back to America, right?
You know what? I almost every time I go to Japan, I go to Japan once or twice a year. Almost every time I go to Japan, I have to buy another suitcase to bring back books.
Yes, Jin. I'm going to say it wrong. Jim Bokcho. Jim.
Yeah.
Oh my God. Yeah. Suitcase
cool.
time.
Mm-hmm.
It's so cool. Yeah.
Just walk into Don Quixote, spend $40, and then there you go.
That's it. I have spent so much money at Don Quixote buying new suitcases. It's ridiculous.
I got to finally go 2 years ago thanks to Jessica, and then last year I spent a month and some change out there. So I was up and down that country, and seeing 8 days versus 34 days. You get a lot more in.
Absolutely.
But finally hearing like what people who there's a set. When you meet someone who's been to Japan more than once, they start developing a secondhand language because you're in the secret club now. Like, and you kind of, I noticed that for years. They're just like, oh, we're going to Donkey. I'm like, the hell is Donkey? And they're like,
yeah.
When you go, you'll know. And yes, my buddy, our friend Helmy, he was my shepherd, if you will, when I was there the first time, and he's like, we gotta go to Donkey. I'm like, what is this place? Everyone keeps, he's like, let me show you. I'm like, my mind, I can't comprehend. This is, it's like the ending of the terrible Indiana Jones movie where the alien is shoving everything into Kate Blanchett's head at one point. And I'm just like, this is so overwhelming. He's like, yeah, I got to pick up a suitcase because I just dropped $400 at Mandarake on Godzilla figures. I'm like, what? And he's like, yeah, let me show you Yodobashi. And I'm just in there. I'm just like going through like the time vortex of like, as a kid, I'm like, this is Fedco. Oh my God. Like they're still living the dream out here. So, but yes, I love it out there. Obviously, I mean, clearly you fell in love with it. I mean, and you've seen it change too.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. So I spent a big chunk of the 1990s and into the 2000s, into the aughts in Japan. So that was the time when I spent years at a time in Japan. Now that I'm working at an American university, I tend to go back during my summers when I've got some free time.
Mm-hmm.
So it tends to be shorter trips. But yeah, over the course of these, what was it, 1987 that I made my first trip to Japan. So yeah, it's been a hot minute. And Japan's changed a lot. It's been changed. I watched Japan go from its extremely, extremely rich days when it looked like the economy was going to take over the world to much more kind of precarious time. And now Japan's population is shrinking. So Japan has hugely changed over the course of the time that I've gone to Japan, and it's exciting. I'm at the point too. I'm sorry. I don't mean to bivouac here and just go on and on.
No. Please, this is why I love long form conversation. This is
not so long.
Just for those listening, I promised this man we weren't going to drone on and on, and then we're about an hour and 30 minutes into this, and we're getting a little off topic. So we'll when you're ready, we'll wrap this up. But please finish with that.
Well, just one final one. I'll finish this thought and then
Mhm.
turn back to you. I was recently in Japan with a friend of mine who is really into trains, and so he decided he wanted to go to a train museum. And trains really aren't my thing, but
Mhm.
but I'm like, okay, I'll go along with you. And I was so shocked to see that in all the historical displays of the changing bullet trains in Japan and so on, that like there were in the old historical corner the trains that I remember from the first time I went to Japan. I'm like, oh my god, I'm old. That was the first moment in my life that I realized, like, oh damn, I'm middle aged.
Yeah, well, you said 87. You went the first time. I'm like, you said you went as in high school. I'm like, there's no way, no way you're that old. I'm 41
Well,
years old. I was born in 84. I'm like, no, 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 no. Like
well,
I want to know what your secret is because I hope God, I'm aging terribly right now. Like just I'm turning into Gandalf. I have to keep the beard at bay in order not to have that happen. But
my beard
bravo,
is
sir.
pretty
Bravo.
gray. Hey.
Yeah.
No, no, Jeffrey, you have young spirit and you look young. I was actually going to say you're not old because their advancement in technology is very fast. There's been images of the same conductor from the first train that he started to the Shinkansen, and it was like less than 30 years or something crazy. Don't quote me on the years out there, but it was the same man. And they have it in other Asian countries as well, but their technology advanced very quickly too in a very short amount of time.
That's
So
absolutely, yeah.
And the wildest thing, like again, not a train guy, but when I was waiting for my Shinkansen, watching the conductors like lean out old style, like the steam engine as they're coming in, I'm like, there's something brash about that, but also I kind of admire it. There's a ballsiness to it, and I'm like, my hat's off to you guys because you're keeping certain like traditions alive. There's no way some guy who's conducting an Amtrak is leaning out of his car in this day. I'm like, you're you're driving a train that goes faster than Superman, and yet when you're pulling in, it's just like the steam engine and Back to the Future 3. You're just rolling on in, and you're greeting everyone waiting to get get to Osaka from Tokyo. So, all right. Well,
Nice.
on that note, the book is The Luminous Fairies and Mothra. It is by the University of Minnesota Press. Did I get that right?
Yep.
It is widely available. You can get it at Barnes & Noble, Amazon, wherever finer books are sold. If you haven't got your copy, if you're listening to this, even if you're listening to this deep into the future, go buy a copy. Find one. It's such a wild book, and I can't believe I'm sitting here talking about this book. It's something that was always just tangentially whispered about in the deeper corners of this fandom. It is now available for everyone to get their paws on. And plus, you know what? If you haven't picked up a book in a while, go pick up a book. It does you well to read.
It's good for
We all went. I am the child. I am a child of the Scholastic Book Fair era. So,
yes.
I bought 3 copies of Jeremy Thatcher's Dragon Hatcher, and I read it cover to cover. So, please go out there, pick it up, support these because there's a lot out there, as you mentioned, that I would love to see this to keep going. Part of me hopes, I doubt it'll happen, but man, I kind of want that half human novella.
Oh,
Really,
okay. Really? Okay. Okay.
that's a deep cuts one for me. That one I've only heard a couple of whispers about, but it's one of the few things that's I think still available out there in comparison to the movie in Japan, which is not. So hopefully that if this sells well enough, like what Toho, what else you got? Let's start mining. There's gold here. You tapped into a vein that no one else has tapped into. So and I hope it keeps you working for years and years on. On that note, that actually, Jeffrey, where can people find more of you online if they want to reach out to you? By the way.
So I'll be honest that I'm a little bit of an old-fashioned guy. I spend a lot less time online. I find that when I spend a lot of time on social media, then I'm not writing and I'm not translating and I'm not doing the things I think that will last. I've really pulled back on my social media presence, but I do have an Instagram, Jeffrey Angles, and I do have Facebook is one of the ones that I use a lot. I know that's for old people, but hey, So those are the two main ones for me. Yeah, I'd love to see some of you guys there.
And then Jessica, where can the good people find more of us?
Yes, we are all over on social media, thanks to Chris basically keeping it alive. YouTube, the Kaiju Kingdom Podcast, Facebook, the Kaiju Kingdom Podcast, Instagram, and Twitter. We have you for those that are listening but want to watch it. We are on YouTube, and everywhere podcasts can be found on Spotify and Audible, all of that. Just put in the Kaiju Kingdom Podcast. You will be able to find us. There are some people that want to directly connect with us. The Kaiju Kingdom Podcast at gmail.com. Those who are more shy and just want to tell us something in private, we will see and respond. And thank you to Krista always responding on our emails too.
I try my best. And on that note, that will do it for this edition, the very first of 2026 of the Kaiju Kingdom Podcast. For myself, Jeffrey, and
Jessica.
Thanks for listening, guys. Thanks for watching. And we'll see you next time.
Thanks so much.